Colorama, a Recorded Books high-bridge imprint, presents American Injustice, My Battle to Expose the Truth by John Paul McIsaac, read by Tom Parks. Introduction. One seemingly minor and random computer repair job upended my world, turning it into a nightmare. I never expected that I would become a central figure in a national security threat involving a wealthy and powerful political family, or that the government I once believed in, the government my loved ones had served and fought for, would turn its back on me. Beginning in April 2019, when Hunter Biden brought 3 damaged Mac computers into my repair shop, I sought only to do the right thing at every step. And at almost every step, I was met with skepticism, suspicion, and even death threats. I feared for my life, not just in the face of angry strangers, but in the face of a hostile FBI. Intelligence agency directors turned on me. Friends and community members turned on me. Even my customers turned on me. My business might never recover. And I will never feel completely safe while the world at large continues to see me as an enemy. So this is an attempt to set the record straight, to show that my actions regarding the incriminating laptop were all done in the interest of protecting our great country, that I tried to follow the proper protocols, although there was no guidebook, that I'm not a spy, a Russian hacker, a liar, or an evil person coldly motivated by politics. If you see something, say something, we're told. I did see something, and I did say something. I was vilified for it. Hopefully, this true recounting of events will restore my good name and my feeling of personal safety. Listen to it and judge for yourself. Prologue. The Call. October 13th, 2020. It's 10 minutes until closing, ending another slow Tuesday at the Mac shop, my computer repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware. I refuse to close early in case a customer comes in. Tuesday used to be my busiest day of the week. I'd be buried in work. Now, with business about a quarter of what it was before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I find myself buried in YouTube videos about World War II aircraft instead. I can't really complain, though. Business has been picking back up since the lockdown was lifted. And unlike many people I know, I never lost my job or had to close. Many of my clients consider me an essential service worker, and I've stayed open for them, even though most of them have been staying away for months now. I love my shop. It's a 20 by 40-foot ground-floor retail unit on the back side of a little multi-level shopping center built in the 1980s. The group of shops is in Trolley Square, about 2 miles west from the center of Wilmington, and home to bars and restaurants as well as stores. I've put a lot of work into my place, replacing the vomit-colored linoleum with weathered wood-look planks, adding a collection of vintage Apple products affectionately named the Mac Museum, bringing in an 8-foot palm tree for a splash of color, framed posters of old Apple products and ad campaigns now adorn the pale gray walls. The back holds a service and storage area. The waiting area at the front has an Apple Genius-inspired bar in light pine laminate with 5 seats, plus a large gray leather couch. The bar is void of equipment now, except for my collection of smaller Apple gadgets displayed at the end. In the past, some days I would be lucky to have a few feet of open countertop to serve new customers. I miss the days when iMacs were lined up front to back on the counter like Rockettes. When things were busy, I often sat behind the counter behind the 17-inch screen of a MacBook Pro. I'd have to locate the store phone by sound instead of sight, and getting my hands on the right screwdriver could be a challenge. Behind me on the wall that divides the customer-facing part of the store from the service and storage area, hangs a 55-inch flat-screen TV. Originally used for training and demonstrations, it's now more a conveyor of Netflix and YouTube videos. Tonight, my back is facing the TV as I watch videos on a smaller screen, optimistically keeping an eye on the door. The phone suddenly jangles, pulling my attention away from the video. I lean back from my screen and sigh deeply, thinking, what kind of service is someone expecting to get so close to closing? Mac Shop, I say, cheerily into the phone. Hello, my name is George Messiers. I'm a lawyer for Hunter Biden, the voice says. The world freezes. It feels like an eternity before my heart starts beating again. How can I help you? I finally respond, calmly and clearly. My client dropped off some equipment, maybe a laptop, in 2017, and we're checking to see if you're still in possession of it, the man says. My thoughts flick back to December 2019, when Special Agent Mike DeMeo of the FBI gave me instructions for what to do if someone ever came looking for Hunter's laptop, which was now in the FBI's possession. Stall them. Tell them it's in another building, and you will retrieve it the following day, Agent DeMeo told me. Text me, and I'll return it to you in 24 hours. Now, I tell George, normally we don't hold on to equipment that has been abandoned for that long. I have an off-site location for all of our recycled and abandoned equipment. I can check tomorrow and let you know. Then, cool as a cucumber on the surface, I try to get something in writing, too. Just so I know who I'm talking to and that you're allowed to represent my client, can you email me your contact information? I ask. I provide my email and tell him I'll contact him tomorrow. I'm feeling like I'm handling this well. Maybe the adrenaline is fueling my confidence when he says, So, are you still located on the backside of Trolley Square? My heart sinks. Before, when George said Hunter had left the computer at my shop in 2017, I thought, this guy's 2 years off and can't remember a thing. It was 2019. I might still get out of this somehow. But when he mentions my location, my hope quickly fades and is replaced with fear. I look toward the big windows at the front of the store and realize how exposed I am. I give George the store address and again tell him I'll look into the abandoned equipment. He thanks me for my time and hangs up. I run around the counter, pull down the blinds, and lock the door. Then I pick up the phone again and call Robert Costello, a lawyer for Rudy Giuliani I've been working with. Hey, boss, I just received a call from a man claiming to be a lawyer for Hunter. He asked if I still had the laptop. What do I do? Not much to do, Bob replies. That ship has sailed. I repeat the conversation with George back to Bob and ask, how did they find me? It's standard procedure before an article goes to press that those involved would be contacted for comment, he says. The New York Post would be running a story on the contents of Hunter's laptop the next day. So, I'm screwed, and they know where I am, I respond. Don't worry. Go home and relax, Bob says. The article is going out tomorrow, and they can't stop it. Call me if you get into trouble. Everything will be okay. My Mac dings with an email notification. A message from George reads, John Paul, thank you for speaking with me tonight. As I indicated, I am a lawyer for Hunter Biden, and I appreciate you reviewing your records on this matter. Thank you. Well, shit. The cat's out of the bag now. I have to get out of the shop, but I can't go home. What if someone is watching the shop? What if they follow me home? All the awful scenarios I've been imagining over the past year return in vivid force. I realize that the same FBI that has been so active in hiding the truth from the American people and protecting the Biden family could easily have handed out my personal information, or worse, could be waiting for me at my house. I text a friend and ask if I can stay the night, then call for an Uber. I've never been to this person's house, and it's off the radar. I tell myself all I have to do is make it through the night and brace for what the next day will bring. I figure, at least with the stories making the news, it will be harder for someone to make me disappear. I'm trying to be optimistic, but fear and anxiety are creeping in. I turn off the shop lights and wait in the dark for the Uber to arrive. For most of the ride, I keep looking over my shoulder, wondering if the headlights behind us are following me. For the first time in my life, I have a panic attack. My heart feels like it's beating out of my chest. I feel disconnected from my body. My mind is racing with thoughts of every potential outcome to this: murder, prison, threats and harm to my family and friends whom I've tried so hard to protect. Each thought adds another layer of anxiety, pinning me down and pressing against my chest. No air seems to be reaching my lungs. Finally, I arrive at my destination. My friend gives me a pillow and a blanket for the couch. I try to go to sleep, but sleep is the last thing on my mind tonight, and it will be the same for many nights to come. Part 1. The Handoff. A little backstory. I was born on May 3, 1976, a pale, hairy, blond, blue-eyed baby boy. The nurses quickly dubbed me the White Ape. It wasn't until about 5 years later that doctors would officially label me an oculocutaneous albino, meaning I have almost no melanin pigment in my skin, hair, and eyes. People with oculocutaneous albinism don't just have very light skin and eyes. The lack of melanin in the eyes results in vision abnormalities. I guess after too many collisions with sliding glass and screen doors, my parents had decided it was time to figure out what was wrong. Along with the diagnosis came a long list of do's and don'ts, followed closely by expectations and limitations. Needless to say, growing up under these rules was very frustrating. But from this frustration sprouted determination and a will to find a way to do the things people told me I couldn't. Visual communication became a passion. I learned early that I could see a screen more clearly when I sat 4 inches in front of it, and I discovered I could achieve a level of detail in my artistic creations digitally. Although I had a fondness for ceramics, likely due to the tactile quality, my world opened up when I sat in front of a Mac. In the summer of 1988, when I was 12 years old, my parents sent me off to live with my Aunt Kathy and Uncle Neil in Colorado, most likely to give my mother a much-needed break. My aunt was a math teacher in the Denver public school system. She was strict and quick to discipline, but also loves me dearly and has always been one of my greatest supporters. And that summer, she brought home an Apple Macintosh II. It was the first color Macintosh. It was life-changing. I could make art on a computer. No more paint on clothes or the carpet, no more forgetting to clean the brushes. And with Apple's assistive technologies, mainly the zoom feature, I could achieve a level of detail I never could have imagined before. Although I couldn't see the details on any printouts, I knew they were there because I could see them on the screen by zooming in. The Macintosh II was the doorway to a new world, one where I could move around freely. I just needed the right tools, and the Mac gave me those tools. Thus began my love affair with Macs. The Mac part of my name is just a coincidence, as with my father earning the nickname Mac while in the military. My last name is McIsaac, a good Scottish name with nothing to do with computers. Fast forward a few decades. At age 28, I was working as a lead genius at an Apple store in Delaware. As part of the leadership team, I was responsible for delivering exceptional customer experiences and helping ensure that all the team members had the tools and support they needed to do so as well, among other things. After about 3 years there, when I was 31, I was transferred to a new Apple store in Littleton, Colorado, about 11 miles from Denver. Until I was able to find a place to live, my Aunt Kathy once again welcomed me into her home. I was back living in her basement, but now my Uncle Neil had created an utter masterpiece of a living area. And this time, I wasn't discovering Macintosh, I was fixing Macintoshes. It felt like coming full circle. I felt a completeness. Then, the Great Recession of the late 2000s hit, causing the focus of your typical Apple store to shift from service to sales, from fixing and preserving to replacing. But I still wanted to protect customers' investments and not just separate their money from their wallet. I thought there was an opportunity to recreate an Apple store, but as it was in the golden age of Apple service. No appointments, no time limits, no taking away your beloved or needed Mac for 2 weeks. And with customer service that started and ended with a handshake, not a web form or a phone call. Ride-sharing apps hadn't been invented yet, and Denver's mass transit didn't work for me, so I returned to Delaware and opened my own Mac repair shop. About 9 years later, my life changed as radically as when I'd first fallen in love with the Mac. Only this time, it wasn't for the better. April 12, 2019. It was a Friday night, 10 minutes before the shop's closing time. I was checking out a website about computer numerical control, CNC machines, and woodworking. I had no intention of working late. I was ready to go out after a long and busy week, but then bright, cool LED headlights bounced off the counter from the front window. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. My vision of leaving the shop and joining my friends quickly faded as the door chime sounded. As was usual for this time of day, I thought, what kind of person expects quality service right before closing time? I struggled not to roll my eyes when in stumbled a man clutching 3 MacBook Pros. He was about my height, 6 feet tall, but a little heavier. He wore casual clothing, dark blue and gray. Alcohol fumes preceded him. He slid the 3 laptops onto the bar counter as he fumbled for a seat. "I'm glad you're still open," he said. "I just came from the cigar bar and they told me about your shop, but I had to hurry because you close at 7. He looked older than me, but had a surprisingly high-pitched voice. An air of entitlement radiated off him. Great, I thought, another one who thinks the world revolves around them. To him, I said cordially, "You made it just in time." "I need the data recovered off these, but they all have liquid damage and won't turn on," he said. "Well, let's get you checked in and see what's going on." One of the computers had a Beau Biden Foundation sticker covering the Apple logo, but I wasn't sure at first whom I was talking to. I opened my customer relationship management software, CRM, and asked him for his first name. "Hunter," he said. I then asked him for his last name. He paused and looked at me funny, as if I were from another country, and how dare I not know who he was? Biden, he responded with a sarcastic edge. I collected his phone number and email and fed them into the system. Once the paperwork was started, I paused and remembered that this guy had lost his brother Beau about 2 or 3 years earlier, and I felt a little bad for him. Maybe the Mac with the sticker belonged to his now deceased brother, and it would bring closure to have access to those memories trapped inside. On any other night, especially a Friday, being that I was very single, I would have collected the machines and looked at them the next day. For some reason, maybe misplaced compassion, I decided to check them over then and there. One at a time, I performed a quick inspection of the machines. The 15-inch laptop was a complete write-off. It had extensive liquid damage, and because the drive was soldered to the logic board, data recovery was beyond my capability. If a Mac can't power on, you won't be able to access the drive and get to the data. The 13-inch 2015 MacBook Pro was in slightly better shape. It could boot up, but the keyboard was unresponsive. I pulled out an external keyboard and asked for permission to log in. Hunter started laughing. "My password is fucked up. Don't be offended," he said, before announcing that it was anal fuck 69 or something to that extent. His inebriated condition made it difficult to understand his speech. My eyes widened a bit, and I told him that maybe it would be best if he tried to log in himself. "Hey, you fixed it," he stated, slurring slightly. I asked if he had an external keyboard that he could use to get around the failure of his internal keyboard, and he just looked at me blankly. "Here, you can borrow this one to perform the recovery yourself," I told him. "That way, I don't have to check it in and bill you. Just bring it back when you're done." It would have been less work for me that way, and again, I felt bad for this guy. I'd often walked under Hunter's dead brother's name, which adorned the Amtrak station in Wilmington. Bo had been Delaware's district attorney and had died of brain cancer. Aside from that, about all I knew was that he had been the good kid and Hunter was the black sheep. From my own experience as the black sheep of the family, I felt sympathy and wanted to help this guy out. I moved on to the last Mac, a 13-inch 2016 MacBook Pro. The drive was soldered onto the logic board. This one powered on, but then would shut down. I suspected that there was a short in the keyboard or trackpad, and if I took it apart, I could at least get it to boot and possibly recover the data. I explained the repair to Hunter. He agreed to the terms and conditions and signed the paperwork, checking in the computer. I stayed behind as he left the shop. Although it was now well past 7 p.m., I proceeded to take the Mac apart and disconnect the trackpad and keyboard to test my theory. After working on it for about 30 minutes, I was relieved that the machine was able to power on and was mostly stable. I proceeded to inspect the drive. It was 256 gigabytes in size and about 85% full. The drive passed its diagnostics, so I decided to perform a clone of the drive to the store's server. A clone is a term loosely used to describe a block or sector copy of the drive. If you want to copy a drive in its entirety, you copy the blocks or physical sectors of a drive. This copies the data residing on those sectors, both visible and deleted. The process is also incredibly easy and requires only a few clicks of the mouse to set up. I would start the cloning process to run overnight and mop up whatever hadn't made it in the morning. When I turned off the lights and locked up for the night, I was surprised to see Hunter's big black Ford Raptor truck still sitting in front of my shop, with all of its fancy angles and lighting. I couldn't tell if Hunter was still inside sleeping or what. My focus was on salvaging what was left of my night before coming back in at 10 a.m. the next day, Saturday. April 13th, 2019. Saturdays were my anchor. Out of the 6 days a week my shop was open, Saturday was the only day that my lunch break was dictated by my own needs, not my customers'. And it was different in other ways, too. I woke up earlier. I felt an eagerness for the day, as opposed to warming up to it slowly in front of YouTube or my phone on the couch. And I walked to work briskly on uncrowded streets, instead of having to navigate the obstacle course of vendors, customers, and everyone else. I also enjoyed the silence as I walked around the back sides of the shops while being greeted by the blinding sun. It was calming. By the time I turned the key in the lock just before 10 a.m., I felt more prepared to tackle the day than normal. I felt good, ready to start the countdown to the perfect breakfast sandwich. But on this Saturday, reality kicked in quickly as I remembered the work I had put off from the previous day. I sat down in front of my Mac and opened up the CRM. A quick scroll revealed that out of the 5 repairs that had come in the previous day, 3 were awaiting parts and 2 were awaiting service. Nobody delivers parts on Saturday, so I focused on the other 2. one being Hunter Biden's request for data recovery from liquid damage. Before I could run in the back to check the status, however, the door chime sounded. A senior woman slowly approached the bar, clutching a thick collection of paperwork along with her MacBook Air. I knew instantly that the problem would be passwords difficulty, a monthly occurrence for this customer. Besides data recovery and failing hard drives, resetting people's passwords is the most common service I perform. Luckily, I had memorized her MacBook login password and only had to steer her in the right direction today. But again, before I could finish that job and return to Hunter's laptop, the door chime sounded with a new customer. In walked a man with a 20-inch iMac with a video card issue. When I explained the problem and the cost to fix it, he decided to just buy a new machine instead of have this one fixed. I didn't charge either customer, even though I'd spent an hour with them. I have a rule. If I don't have to take a screwdriver to it or have to check it in, I don't bill. To me, it's more important to give free advice and build a relationship than to squeeze a dime out of everyone who walks through the door. Maybe that's why I'm not rich, but maybe it's also why my business had 5-star ratings on social media. Finally, I went in the back to check on Hunter's liquid-damaged MacBook Pro. It had powered off, dying overnight during the file transfer. I now realized that this was not going to be a simple drag-and-drop procedure. There was about 300 gigabytes worth of data, but not enough charge in the battery to do it all in one go. I started to charge the unit again, planning to give it a couple of hours before making a second attempt. But I also decided to see what had been successfully transferred to the server, praying I didn't have to start all over again. The recovered folder was a little over 100 gigabytes, a third of the total amount needed to be recovered. Seemed like a good start, but when I opened the recovery folder, I saw that only the desktop folder had been transferred. Holy shit, I thought. This guy has a ton of crap on his desktop. There were hundreds of files and photos, and they weren't organized at all, just piled one on top of the other. What a mess! I changed the folder view to a columns view to see the files and folders in an alphabetical list. Clicking on a folder in the list opens up a new column with the contents of the folder, and clicking on a file in that column brings up a preview of the file. Eventually, in 2 separate windows, I would be able to bring up both the original desktop and what I had copied, compare them, and transfer the missing files to the recovery window. But first, I had to wait until there was enough of a charge in the battery to power on the Mac and keep it on. And it was getting close to 11:45 a.m., meaning I had a sandwich to order from Angelo's Luncheonette. One of my favorite things about going to Angelo's is the walk. It is a straight shot up the hill on Gilpin Avenue from my shop. You leave the Trolley Square parking lot, cross DuPont Street, and immediately find yourself facing a row of trees, straddling the top of a steep hill and a sea of weeds, working their way down onto a brick sidewalk. Then you go under a single-track train bridge. This whole area got its name from the long-deceased trolley line that once headed east into the city. After you pass under the bridge, Gilpin Avenue goes from commercial to residential. It's void of bars and restaurants here except for Angelo's, sitting at the top of the hill. It's a quiet and peaceful walk up to the place, with a smooth and consistent grade, which, being visually impaired, I greatly appreciated. I was used to not asking for help unless I absolutely needed it. In fact, I became a Mac repair guy despite being told it was too visually intensive for me. I had been working in a cafe and doing a state vocational program, and heard customers talking about how the Delaware Center for Education and Technology was looking for a Macintosh tech to work in public schools. So, I quit my job at the cafe and moved up to New Castle County with a new job fixing Macs and training educators. After my time with the state, I was sure that if I wanted something done, I'd find a way to do it myself. From there...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?